OMG. Your soulmate cut someone off after finding this about you. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now because something happened behind the scenes that you were never supposed to see. Something quiet. Something unexpected. Something that began with a simple realization and ended with a decision that changed everything. And listen to this, your soulmate cut someone off. Not slowly. Not after months of obvious conflict. Not because of one dramatic argument that made everything fall apart. No. What happened was much deeper than that. It started the moment they discovered something about you that they had never fully understood before. And your heart needs this right now because the truth is, what they discovered wasn't something new. It wasn't a secret you were hiding. It wasn't something you suddenly became. It had always been there. The difference is that this time, they finally saw it clearly. And listen to this, there are moments in life when someone can be standing right in front of something valuable and still not fully recognize its worth. Not because the value isn't there, but because their perspective isn't ready yet. They are distracted. Focused elsewhere. Looking through the wrong lens. And your heart needs this right now because that is exactly where they were. They saw you before. They knew you before. They felt your energy before. But they had never truly stopped and looked deeply enough to understand what was actually in front of them. And listen to this, something changed recently. A moment. A conversation. A realization. Something that caused them to pause and see things differently. And once that happened, everything they thought they understood began shifting. Because suddenly, they started noticing things about you that they had overlooked. Your consistency. Your honesty. Your ability to remain genuine even when no one was watching. The way your actions matched your words. The way your energy remained steady instead of changing depending on who was around you. And your heart needs this right now because those qualities are rare. They are not loud. They are not dramatic. They do not demand attention. But once someone recognizes them, they become impossible to ignore. And listen to this. At first, they didn't fully understand why this realization affected them so strongly. They simply noticed that something felt different. Something inside them kept returning to thoughts of you. Kept replaying moments involving you. Kept comparing what they saw in you with what they were seeing elsewhere. And that comparison began happening naturally. Not because they were trying to compare. Not because they were searching for reasons. But because truth naturally creates contrast. And your heart needs this right now because once someone sees something real, everything else begins to reveal itself more clearly. Things that once seemed acceptable suddenly feel empty. Things that once seemed exciting suddenly feel superficial. Things that once felt enough suddenly feel incomplete. And listen to this. The person they eventually cut off wasn't necessarily someone they hated. This wasn't about anger. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about drama. In fact, that is what made it so difficult. Because sometimes the hardest decisions are not between something good and something bad. Sometimes they are between something familiar and something real. And your heart needs this right now because familiarity has power. It creates comfort. It creates routine. It creates a sense of security even when something deeper is missing. And for a while, that familiarity was enough to keep them where they were. But then they found out something about you. Or perhaps more accurately, they finally understood something about you. And once they did, the comfort they once relied on no longer felt the same. And listen to this. They may have tried to ignore it at first. They may have told themselves they were overthinking. They may have tried to focus on what they already had instead of what they were beginning to realize. But every time they tried, the same awareness returned. Quietly. Consistently. Patiently. And your heart needs this right now because truth does not need to force itself. It simply remains present until it can no longer be ignored. And listen to this. They started noticing differences everywhere. The difference between someone who says the right things and someone who means them. The difference between attention and genuine care. The difference between temporary connection and something deeper. And every time they noticed those differences, your presence became stronger in their mind. Not because you were trying to prove anything. Not because you were competing for their attention. But because authenticity has a way of standing out when someone is finally ready to recognize it. And your heart needs this right now because what they discovered about you touched something deeper than attraction. It touched respect. Trust. Admiration. The kind of feelings that grow slowly but last much longer than temporary emotions. And listen to this. The more they reflected, the more difficult it became to stay connected to something that no longer felt aligned. They began questioning things they never questioned before. Looking at situations differently. Paying attention to details they once overlooked. And every answer led back to the same realization. Every path led back to the same truth. Every comparison led back to the same understanding. And that understanding was changing them. And your heart needs this right now because this is where the shift truly began. Not when they cut someone off. Not when they made the decision. But when they realized they could no longer pretend not to see what they now understood about you. Because once someone sees something clearly, they cannot unsee it. Once someone recognizes something real, they cannot return to the illusion that existed before. And listen to this. Long before the other person knew anything was changing, long before anyone else noticed a difference, the decision had already begun forming inside them. Quietly. Slowly. Naturally. Like a seed growing beneath the surface. And your heart needs this right now because what happened next was not sudden at all. It was the result of every realization, every comparison, every moment of clarity leading them toward one unavoidable truth. What they discovered about you had changed everything. And once that truth settled inside them, nothing could remain the same. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now because what happened after that realization, after they finally saw something in you that they could no longer ignore, was not immediate on the outside, but internally, everything had already started changing. And listen to this. This is where the story becomes deeper than most people realize. Because cutting someone off was never the first step. The first step was awareness. The first step was recognizing that something they once accepted without question no longer felt the same. And your heart needs this right now because awareness is powerful. Once it arrives, it changes how someone sees everything around them. It changes conversations. It changes feelings. It changes the meaning behind things that once seemed normal. And listen to this. After discovering this truth about you, they began looking at their life through a different lens. Suddenly, situations that once felt comfortable started feeling restrictive. Conversations that once felt meaningful started feeling repetitive. Connections that once felt exciting started feeling strangely empty. And your heart needs this right now because they were no longer comparing people. They were comparing feelings. They were comparing authenticity. They were comparing how their heart responded in different situations. And every comparison brought them closer to a truth they had been avoiding. And listen to this. They tried to be logical about it at first. They told themselves they were imagining things. They told themselves that everyone has flaws, that every connection goes through difficult periods, that maybe they were simply overthinking. But the more they tried to explain it away, the stronger the feeling became. And your heart needs this right now because truth rarely disappears when questioned. It usually becomes stronger. It becomes clearer. It becomes impossible to dismiss. And listen to this. There were moments when they found themselves thinking about you unexpectedly. Not because they planned to. Not because someone mentioned your name. Not because anything reminded them of you directly. You simply appeared in their awareness. And when you did, something inside them felt different. Lighter. Calmer. More genuine. And your heart needs this right now because those moments began creating a contrast they could not ignore. A contrast between what felt authentic and what felt forced. Between what felt natural and what required constant effort. And listen to this. The person they eventually cut off may never have understood what was happening. From the outside, everything may have seemed normal. Conversations continued. Routines stayed the same. Life appeared unchanged. But internally, your soulmate was changing every day. Quietly. Gradually. Consistently. And your heart needs this right now because real transformation rarely announces itself. It happens beneath the surface first. It happens in thoughts no one hears and realizations no one else can see. And listen to this, there came a point where they could no longer ignore the discomfort growing inside them. Not because the other person had done something terrible. Not because there was some dramatic betrayal. But because staying connected to something that no longer felt aligned started becoming emotionally exhausting. And your heart needs this right now because misalignment creates a kind of heaviness that becomes impossible to carry forever. At first it feels small. Then noticeable. Then overwhelming. And eventually, it demands a decision. And listen to this, your soulmate found themselves reflecting more deeply than ever before. They revisited conversations. They replayed moments. They examined feelings they had pushed aside for months, maybe even years. And every time they looked deeper, they found the same answer waiting for them. The same realization standing quietly in the background. The same truth refusing to disappear. And your heart needs this right now because that truth was connected to what they discovered about you. Not just who you are, but what you represent. Integrity. Consistency. Emotional honesty. A rare kind of authenticity that becomes more valuable the more someone understands it. And listen to this, they began recognizing that what attracted them wasn't something superficial. It wasn't appearance. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't temporary chemistry. It was something deeper. Something stable. Something that remained true regardless of circumstances. And your heart needs this right now because once someone experiences that kind of realization, their standards begin to change. What they tolerate changes. What they desire changes. What they are willing to accept changes. And listen to this. The decision itself did not happen in one dramatic moment. It happened through 100 small moments of clarity. 100 quiet realizations. 100 internal conversations where they slowly accepted what their heart had already known for some time. And your heart needs this right now because decisions made from clarity are very different from decisions made from emotion. Emotional decisions can be reversed. Clarity-based decisions rarely are. And listen to this. When they finally reached that point, there was a sense of sadness mixed with relief. Sadness because endings are rarely easy, even when necessary. Relief because they no longer had to pretend. They no longer had to force something that no longer felt right. They no longer had to ignore what they knew deep down. And your heart needs this right now because letting go is not always about rejecting someone. Sometimes it is about honoring a truth that has become impossible to deny. And listen to this, the moment they cut that person off, something shifted inside them. Not dramatically. Not instantly. But undeniably. It felt like a weight they had been carrying without realizing it was finally gone. It felt like space had opened where confusion once existed. It felt like they could finally hear themselves clearly again. And your heart needs this right now because that clarity did not lead them away from you. It led them closer to understanding what you truly mean to them. Closer to understanding why discovering that truth about you affected them so deeply. Closer to understanding why their heart refused to let it go. And now, even though the decision has been made, the deeper realization is only beginning to unfold. Because what they found out about you was never just information. It was a revelation that changed how they see connection itself. And that realization is continuing to grow stronger every single day. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now because after they made that decision, after they finally stepped away from something that no longer felt aligned with who they were becoming, they expected to feel certainty and move on. They expected clarity to bring immediate peace. But what happened next surprised them. Because once the noise disappeared, once the distractions faded, once the connection they had been holding on to was finally released, there was only one truth left standing. And listen to this, that truth kept leading them back to you. Not because they were forcing it. Not because they were trying to think about you. But because every realization they had experienced, every lesson they had learned, every comparison they had made seemed to point in the same direction. And your heart needs this right now because this is where everything became impossible to ignore. Before they were comparing feelings. Before they were trying to understand what was missing. Before they were searching for answers. But now the searching had stopped. The answers were already there. And listen to this, they began noticing how often your energy stayed in their mind. Not just in quiet moments. Not just when they were alone. But throughout their day. In the middle of conversations. In the middle of ordinary routines. In moments when they should have been focused on something completely different. You kept appearing. And your heart needs this right now because that kind of presence means something. People do not remain in someone's thoughts that consistently without a reason. There is always something deeper underneath it. And listen to this, at first they tried to explain it logically. They told themselves it was simply because of everything that had recently happened. They told themselves it was natural to reflect. Natural to compare. Natural to think about people who had made an impact. But the more they tried to explain it, the less those explanations made sense. Because this wasn't fading. It wasn't becoming weaker. It was becoming stronger. And your heart needs this right now because strength is what separates a passing thought from a genuine realization. Passing thoughts disappear. Realizations remain. And listen to this. They started looking back at moments involving you from a completely different perspective. Moments that once seemed ordinary now felt significant. Conversations that once seemed simple now carried deeper meaning. Small details they barely noticed before suddenly stood out in ways they never expected. And your heart needs this right now because perspective changes everything. Sometimes nothing about the past changes except the understanding of it. And when understanding changes, the meaning changes, too. And listen to this. They began seeing qualities in you that became more valuable the more they thought about them. Your honesty. Your consistency. Your ability to remain true to yourself regardless of circumstances. The way your actions aligned with your words. The way you never seemed to become someone different just to gain approval from others. And your heart needs this right now because those qualities are not common. They are easy to overlook at first because they are not loud. They do not demand attention. But once someone recognizes their value, they become unforgettable. And listen to this. The more they reflected, the more they realized that what they found in you wasn't something surface level. It wasn't based on excitement. It wasn't based on temporary attraction. It wasn't based on fantasy. It was based on trust, respect, admiration. The kind of foundation that creates something lasting. And your heart needs this right now because foundations matter. Temporary feelings can appear and disappear. But genuine respect grows stronger over time. And listen to this. There were moments when they felt overwhelmed by the realization. Not because it scared them. Not because it felt wrong. But because it felt bigger than they expected. They didn't realize how deeply your presence had affected them until they removed everything else and were forced to look at what remained. And what remained was you. And your heart needs this right now because sometimes clarity arrives through subtraction. Sometimes people only understand what truly matters after everything unnecessary falls away. And listen to this. They may have even questioned themselves during this stage. Wondering whether they were seeing things clearly, wondering whether they were allowing emotions to influence their judgment, wondering whether they should slow down and be more cautious. But every time they stepped back and looked again, the same truth remained. Nothing changed. Nothing weakened. Nothing disappeared. And your heart needs this right now because real truth survives scrutiny. It survives reflection. It survives doubt. If anything, it becomes stronger because of it. And listen to this. Something else began happening during this time. They stopped focusing on what they had lost. Instead, they started focusing on what they had discovered. And that shift changed everything. Because when someone stops looking backward and starts looking forward, their energy changes. Their perspective changes. Their priorities change. And your heart needs this right now because their priorities are changing now. They are no longer investing emotional energy into something that feels empty. They are becoming more aware of what feels genuine, what feels meaningful, what feels aligned with their deeper truth. And listen to this. You represent something important in that realization. Not because you are perfect. Not because you fit some impossible ideal. But because you are real. And real has become incredibly valuable to them. More valuable than appearances. More valuable than convenience. More valuable than comfort. And your heart needs this right now because once someone reaches that level of understanding, they cannot return to the way they viewed things before. They simply can't. Their standards evolve. Their heart evolves. Their awareness evolves. And listen to this, the person they cut off is no longer the focus of this story. That chapter is already closing. The real story now is what happens after clarity arrives. What happens when someone finally understands what matters? What happens when they stop settling for what is familiar and start paying attention to what is genuine? And your heart needs this right now because that is exactly where they are standing. At a crossroads between who they were and who they are becoming. Between old patterns and new understanding. Between the past they have released and the truth they are beginning to embrace. And every step they take forward seems to bring them back to the same realization. That discovering this about you didn't just change one decision. It changed the way they see everything. And that realization is still growing. Still deepening. Still transforming them from the inside out. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you and your heart needs this right now because after everything they realized, after the comparison stopped, after the confusion faded, after they finally accepted why they could no longer stay connected to something that wasn't aligned with their heart anymore, a new phase began. And listen to this, this phase was different. It was quieter, more personal, more honest, because now there was no distraction left. No emotional noise. No situation pulling their attention in multiple directions. There was only clarity. And your heart needs this right now because clarity has a way of revealing things people spend months, sometimes years, trying not to see. Once everything unnecessary falls away, the truth becomes impossible to miss. And listen to this, they started paying attention to themselves in a way they hadn't before. Not to their routines. Not to their responsibilities. Not to what everyone else expected from them. But to their actual feelings. To the things that brought peace and the things that created heaviness. To the people who made them feel understood and the people who made them feel disconnected from themselves. And your heart needs this right now because self-awareness changes everything. It forces someone to stop living on autopilot and start asking deeper questions. Questions about happiness. Questions about fulfillment. Questions about what genuinely matters. And listen to this. Every time they ask those questions, your presence seemed to appear somewhere in the answer. Not because they were trying to force it. Not because they were obsessed. But because certain people leave an imprint that becomes more visible the more honestly someone examines their own heart. And your heart needs this right now because you became part of that reflection. Part of that understanding. Part of that deeper awareness that was unfolding inside them. And listen to this. There were moments when they found themselves smiling unexpectedly because of a memory involving you. A conversation. A small interaction. Something simple that would have seemed insignificant to anyone else. But suddenly it carried a different meaning. Suddenly it felt important. And your heart needs this right now because meaningful connections often reveal their value slowly. Not in dramatic moments. Not in grand gestures. But through the realization that someone's presence continues to bring warmth long after the moment itself has passed. And listen to this. They also began noticing something else. The more honest they became with themselves, the less interested they were in anything artificial. Surface-level attention no longer impressed them. Empty promises no longer felt exciting. Connections built on convenience no longer felt enough. And your heart needs this right now because growth changes what someone desires. The things that once felt attractive begin to lose their appeal when someone starts valuing authenticity above everything else. And listen to this. They may have looked back at the person they cut off and realized something important. The relationship wasn't necessarily built on something terrible. It simply wasn't built on something true enough to survive deeper awareness. And your heart needs this right now because sometimes endings happen not because people are bad, but because they are no longer aligned with who someone is becoming. Growth creates distance where comfort once existed. Truth creates separation where illusion once felt safe. Snorts, and listen to this. Every day that passed seemed to strengthen what they had discovered rather than weaken it. Usually people expect feelings to fade with time. Usually they expect realizations to lose intensity. But that wasn't happening here. If anything, the opposite was true. The more time passed, the more certain they became. And your heart needs this right now because genuine realizations don't depend on temporary emotion. They become part of someone's understanding of life itself. They become woven into how they see the world. And listen to this. They started imagining different possibilities. Different futures. Different paths. Not in a fantasy-driven way, but in a thoughtful way. Wondering what life looks like when choices are made from authenticity instead of obligation. Wondering what happens when someone follows what feels true instead of what feels familiar. And your heart needs this right now because those questions are opening doors inside them that were once closed. Doors they never thought they would revisit. Doors connected to hope, possibility, and emotional honesty. And listen to this. There was also a moment where they realized they were no longer afraid of the truth. Before, uncertainty felt safer. Before, avoiding certain feelings felt easier. Before, staying where they were felt more comfortable than facing what they actually wanted. But now, something had changed. And your heart needs this right now because courage often arrives after clarity. Once someone knows what is real, fear begins losing its power. And listen to this. They are becoming more comfortable with the idea that some connections enter your life for a reason. Not because they are perfect. Not because they are guaranteed. But because they reveal something important about who you are and what you value. And your heart needs this right now because you have become part of that realization. Part of that understanding. Part of that shift in perspective that is transforming how they see relationships altogether. And listen to this. They are no longer focused on what ended. They are focused on what was revealed. They are focused on what they learned. They are focused on the truth that emerged from all of it. And that truth keeps leading them back to the same place. Back to the qualities they discovered in you. Back to the authenticity that caught their attention. Back to the consistency they could not stop respecting. And your heart needs this right now because respect is becoming something much deeper inside them. It is evolving into trust. It is evolving into admiration. It is evolving into something they can no longer dismiss as coincidence. And listen to this. The person they were before this realization and the person they are becoming now are not the same. Their standards have changed. Their priorities have changed. Their understanding of connection has changed. And your heart needs this right now because transformation always creates movement. It always pushes someone towards something new. Towards something more aligned. Towards something that reflects who they truly are. And right now, whether they fully admit it or not, every step of that transformation seems to be bringing them closer and closer to one undeniable truth. Discovering this about you didn't just inspire one decision. It started an entire emotional awakening that is still unfolding, still deepening, and still guiding them toward a future they never expected to imagine before.